During the height of the COVID pandemic, many U.S. states reduced their prison populations in the hopes of slowing the spread of the virus. Thousands of prisoners were released, but not every prisoner was eligible. Most states refused to even consider releasing anyone who had been convicted of what courts called a violent offense. This is par for the course in the United States, where the law marks a categorical difference between violent and nonviolent crimes. Persons convicted of a violent crime, like murder, rape, kidnapping, or assault, are more likely to face longer prison sentences. They're more likely to be refused access to alternatives to prison, such as substance abuse or mental health treatment. They're more likely to be refused probation and parole, and they're likely to have fewer civic and employment opportunities upon release. This seems like only common sense. Our conflicts, we think, need to be resolved non-violently, so we often think that violence is particularly hard to redeem as a way of navigating social conflict. And violent crimes are, almost by definition, committed by violent criminals. So it seems obvious to most of us that the law should take violent crimes more seriously. The philosopher Alex Guerrero argues that this focus on violence is a distraction that can lead us to punish some crimes too heavily and others too mildly. He argues that it's a mistake to single out violent crimes for harsher punishment, and that U.S. law should do away with this category for the purposes of punishment. His argument starts with a familiar idea that the punishment should fit the crime. According to Guerrero, this means that severity of a punishment should depend on two factors. It should depend first on how harmful their crime was, and second on how culpable or at fault the offender was for that crime. Imagine two criminal offenders, Kate and Lisa. If Kate and Lisa are equally culpable for their crimes, but Kate's crime was more harmful than Lisa's, then Kate should receive a harsher punishment. Likewise, if Kate and Lisa committed equally harmful crimes, but Lisa is more culpable for her crime, then Lisa should receive a harsher punishment. And what if Kate and Lisa committed equally harmful crimes for which they're equally culpable? Then, argues Guerrero, they should receive equal punishment. Neither should be punished more harshly than the other. What this means is that violent crimes should be punished more harshly only if they tend to be more harmful or if violent offenders tend to be more culpable. But Guerrero argues that neither of these two things are true. Consider first the question of harmfulness. We're perhaps inclined to think that most violent crimes are especially harmful, because when we think about violent crime, we imagine the most vivid and most harmful kinds. We perhaps imagine one person murdering another in cold blood. But it turns out that the category of violent crime is actually a pretty big one. Most violent crimes are cases of simple assault, and most cases of simple assault are not terribly harmful. Two people who trade a few punches in a drunken bar fight might be convicted of assault, even if no one suffers any physical injuries. The category of nonviolent crime is also a big one. It includes things like fraud, theft, embezzlement, illegal drug manufacturing, and the distribution of child pornography. Many of these crimes are extremely harmful. They certainly seem more harmful than most cases of simple assault, which make up the majority of actual cases of violent crime. Consider, for instance, the true story of Michael Conahan and Mark Chiavarella. Conahan and Chiavarella were county judges in the state of Pennsylvania, where they were discovered to have been running a so-called Kids for Cash scheme over a period of many years. This scheme involved shutting down the county's public youth detention facility in favor of a private, for-profit facility. The two judges then accepted millions of dollars from the facility owner in exchange for imposing arbitrary and excessively harsh punishments on thousands of kids, packing the facility and allowing the owner to increase his profits. For their actions, Conahan and Chiavarella were convicted of fraud and racketeering, two nonviolent crimes. So that's Guerrero's first big claim. Violent crimes do not tend to be more harmful than nonviolent crimes. Guerrero's second big claim is that violent offenders do not tend to be more culpable for their crimes than nonviolent offenders. Guerrero argues that most people who think that violent offenders are especially culpable are under the spell of a dogma that violent offenders are especially bad people, a belief perpetuated by the presentation of violence in television and film. According to this dogma, violent offenders are people with especially bad characters and especially disturbed worldviews. People like HBO's Barry or Showtime's Dexter. But Guerrero argues that the empirical evidence should lead us to reject this dogma. Psychologists, sociologists, and criminologists have shown that in the vast majority of cases, violence is in fact not committed by people who are any more disposed towards violence than you or I. Violence, even in its most harmful forms, is most often committed by ordinary people who find themselves in extremely difficult, emotional, isolated, or stressful situations, or all of the above. Violence, this research suggests, is almost always a product of context, not character. Contrast this with many instances of nonviolent crime. Think of someone like Bernie Madoff, who defrauded thousands of people into financial ruin over the course of decades. In contrast to the vast majority of violent crimes, Madoff's actions were not the products of isolated moments of personal crisis. They were the products of careful plans, carefully executed over a very long period of time. This, it turns out, is a feature common to many nonviolent crimes. Fraud, theft, embezzlement, and the making of child pornography. These are all actions that are likely to be the product of deliberate planning and execution. And they are, for this reason, actions that are likely to be the product of a person's character, and not just the product of an isolated and extremely high-pressure situation. So, if any group tends to be more culpable for their crimes, maybe it's the nonviolent offenders, and not the violent ones. On June 23, 2020, Michael Conahan, one of the perpetrators of the Kids for Cash scheme, was released from prison 6 years early as part of a COVID release program, for which he would not have been eligible if he had committed a violent crime. This has been a product of the Conceptual Foundations of Conflict project. If you enjoyed this video, or would like to learn more, please follow us on YouTube and check out the project website at conflict.philosophy.academy.